Thank you very much. That's it. First, we have apologies for absence, please. Have we any apologies? Yes.
Councillor Kevin Williams.
Thank you.
Councillor Brian Jones.
Thank you.
Councillor Val Smith and Councillor Simon Howarth.
And I believe Councillor Sheila Woodhouse as well. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Public open forum. I don't believe we have anybody putting forward. No. Okay. My announcements. First of all, I'd like to say that we all feel very much in sympathy with the people of London who suffered so dreadfully with the fire. And our sympathies go out not only to the relatives and friends of those who died, but also to the police and the ambulances and the fire service, all those that were involved, because it must have left a terrible traumatic effect on them. And they're in our thoughts. We have had 2 minutes silence previously over the weeks for this, but I just thought it should be mentioned, as I'm sure you all feel very much the same as myself. Thank you. We have a petition. Councillor Bob Greenland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a petition from the business people of Monmouth, and it is regarding the street furniture policy, which we brought in sometime earlier this year. It reads, "We, the undersigned, petition the Monmouthshire County Council to reconsider the street furniture policy with a view to setting it permanently aside, and 2, to exercise its discretionary powers under Section 49 of the Local Government Finance Act 1988 to reductions in the non-domestic rates payable by businesses that would otherwise suffer hardship." Madam Chair, the petition itself in hard copy is signed by 153 people, and I believe that there are another 119 signatures online. This will be considered by Cabinet and by senior officers, and we will come back to Council later following this petition.
For your interest, you'll find the activities I've been up to as item 3. We have now declarations of interest.
If I can just mention under 8.2, where we're discussing pensions, I'd just like to mention that I am in the age group that falls in the discussion, and the same goes for Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're giving our ages away now, aren't we? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I've obviously already been said that I'm similar to Jane Pratt. Thank you.
That's it. To receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of May, and also the one on the 18th of May, mainly for accuracy, please.
Move.
I just want to bring up one thing on the second lot of minutes. On page 9, there was a spelling mistake. Previous has a U, not a Y, but I expect a finger slipped. But I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you. Thank you. Item 7, to receive the action list of the meeting held on the 18th of May. Is everyone content with that? Seems like it. Oh, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you. I also referred this question to Democratic Services regarding the start of meeting times. I understood wrongly that we were going to meet at 5 for 2 meetings in the summer, but it wasn't decided at the last council, but maybe we should consider that today, whether we're going to have a 5 o'clock start as we did previously.
That's coming up later, isn't it?
It's not on the agenda.
No, it's not.
Chair, it says the next meeting, next council agenda.
Councillor Fox.
Chairman, I think is in that action there, it says to be discussed at the next meeting of the Democratic Services Committee with a view of the committee putting forward recommendations for council in due course. Clearly that hasn't fallen to this meeting because the Democratic Services haven't considered it yet.
So, Councillor Fox, are we to meet? Are we to discuss it today, or is it going to
No, Chairman,
be
it's not on the
discussed at
agenda
Democratic?
today. Democratic Services first, and we wait their recommendations. I'm sure over the summer period they will want to engage with members to see their preferences, so that they can come back to full council and we can make a decision there and then.
Well, to come back on that, Chair, it did say on the action list to add review of meeting times for the next council meeting. Now, I understand what Councillor Fox is saying, but equally, the next Democratic Service meeting most probably couldn't deal with this in time for the next full council meeting, which would be July. And that would most probably be the last meeting that we'd be starting at 5 o'clock in any case. I think after that it would be back to 2 o'clock.
Thank you. I think that the decision has been made to postpone, to give it to the Democratic Services first. I think it should go through that committee before we all have the decision to make, and they can carry out people's opinions and come to a full agreement.
Well, to come back on that again, Chair, there's been a Democratic Services meeting. It wasn't on the agenda. Why?
I don't do the agenda for Democratic Services. I'm afraid I can't answer that. Notices of motion, and I believe you're the first motion, Councillor Easton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Prior to the end of the last year at Christmas on December the 16th, I made representation to Cabinet regarding the transfer of monies from 106 monies from a Castrogi Park in Caldicot. It was decided that it would pass some of the money for that particular park to the leisure centre or the school to do the ATP pitch and hockey games. My knowledge, the information I got is that there's been very, very little use of that particular facility. And really there should have been more thought on why the transfer was made at the time. I'm suggesting to facilitate, or one of the points made in that meeting was that White Hart development in Caldicot, which would be coming on in the next couple of years, would be the focus of 106 monies to complete that work in Castrogi Park. I'm suggesting that we agree, put a motion that we agree to via monies from reserves. There's a precedent for this in as much as 3 or 4 years ago we took monies from reserves to supplement Port Stewart's play areas when the 106 money was not forthcoming at that time. So I believe there's precedent in taking monies forward to carry this work out, because parents are very concerned that they've had a year this year. They're very disappointed they didn't get the work that was promised, and I would ask that Council via this money and facilitate this equipment for the parents. Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Tony. And I can understand your frustration at the time, and the residents' frustration at the time delay in being able to carry out the refurbishment and upgrading works at Castrogi. Indeed, we had a concerned individual, a member of the public, raise some quite serious concerns. So we did actually make sure an officer went out to have a look at the equipment, because we were really quite anxious. But we found out that the park, whilst the equipment is looking tired, we know that, and we are looking forward to it being refurbished. It was safe and usable. Apart from, there are a couple of small areas of surfacing that need to have some attention. Some of the safety servicing needs to be addressed immediately. That has to be put in place, and I would imagine that process is going on. There's a whole raft of reasons, as you know, for the last meeting in December when we would discuss this, and yes, there was a view that any 106 money which could come forward from the White Hart development could be vied toward that project. I don't know if that was a formal decision which was arrived at. I think the formal decision of the meeting, I haven't actually got it, is about carrying out an assessment of all play areas through the county. But however, I do remember that discussion. I absolutely think that is the right way forward, that money, when it comes in due time, should go to that park. But in light of the information I received from officers and the sufficiency of the area just as it is at the moment, I'm sorry, I can't agree that we should go ahead and spend the 106 money before we get it. You know, that's a dangerous thing to start doing. I'm advised that we did that once before. I'm not sure what you were referencing, Port Stewart, because I couldn't quite hear my hearing's like, but I can't recall that there exactly. But the case I've been given here is where we done this similar thing with some education money in Llanfoist. But in that case, the council came unstuck as we spent the whole amount that we were expecting to receive. But what we actually received was less than the full amount, because the developer amended his approved planning application at that time, built less houses than the number originally proposed. And in that case, it left us some £15,000 short, which had to be clawed back over the last 4 years from other developments. So the safe and the sensible thing to do is to, I believe, wait until we receive the off-site contribution from the White Hart development site and proceed with the works at that time. In the meantime, though, the design works for Castroggy can take place, so that there is a plan in place once we receive the money from the developer. And I think it would be absolutely appropriate for Councillor Eason and other local interested members in Caldecott to play a part in the design and the process if they wish to go to address that. So absolutely no problem with spending the money on Castroggy. It is not a financially prudent thing to do to spend reserves against a receipt that we're not sure of the amount coming forward. And that's this is the trouble. Often too many people spend money they haven't got. You should wait until you've got it before you spend it, unless you actually know for pound what's coming in. So, Mr. Chairman, I can't support the motion as it is, but would encourage Tony to actively get involved with local members and local local residents to take part in the design sooner than later.
I'm sorry, it's very remiss of me. I didn't ask for a second. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Chairman, I was trying to catch your attention.
Sorry.
Second the motion.
Right.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Second.
Can I return or not, or do I wait?
Wait till the debate's finished. Yes. If we wait for a few minutes. Councillor Jo Watkins, is it? Got the right one.
Thank you, Chair. Castroggy Park is actually within my ward, and I have already been in communication with parents and also community groups about actually trying to do a combination of trying to find ways forwards to actually address the situation in Castroggy. I think it's a little unfortunate that Councillor Eason brought this motion forwards without having discussed it with me first, because we might have been able to take something forward in a more collaborative way. So what I would actually request of the council is that we do have officers come to discuss with the community groups, help us look at the extra funding possibilities as well, because we're aware that grant funding is available from other sources. And as a community, we're also keen to do individual fundraising. We've had up some interesting ideas, like a scarecrow trail, which we're quite keen on getting put up around Caldecott next year. And what we'd really like to do is use that in collaboration with the Section 106 funding from the White Hart to make sure that the play area at Castroggy is really good for purpose, that it's right for the children and in the area. And we think that would be a very useful way forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Bob Greenland.
Thank you, Chair. And I would support the views put forward by Councillor Joe Watkins just now. I think that is a very sensible way forward. I cannot support this motion. Anybody who has been on this council for any length of time will know that we keep our reserves, our unrestricted reserves, to an absolute minimum. We have had to do that because of the financial pressures we've been under. And if we start using those reserves for projects like this in the expectation that money will come forward, if we were faced with a real crisis in which we needed to use those reserves, they may not be there. So I could not support Councillor Eason's motion.
Councillor Guppy.
Thank you. Sorry, Jo finished a bit too early, but she would like to propose a second motion, and being as she can't speak again, I'll propose it for her. So I propose a second motion to seek support to the
Councillor, it'd have to be an amendment.
an amendment
to
the motion, sorry. To seek support for the vehement monies to bring the park up to a high standard once full engagement with the community and exploration of further financial contributions to the project, and that these monies will be reclaimed from 106 monies at a later date.
You have a seconder. Thank you. Okay. Dimitri.
Really don't want to go down this path, but what is she replacing anything, or is it is it an amendment?
It's an amendment.
Is it added on, or is it replacing any words? Just to be clear.
Amendment.
Is it an addition, or are you removing? Just so I'm clear.
So the amendment, basically the amendment is that further financial contributions are sought, and with further consideration of what the community wants and what they want to do, and if they want to do individual fundraising as well. So, yeah, prior to the advancing of any monies.
Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Before we adopt that, I think I heard the words vehement. I'm quite happy with seeking other ways of getting hold of the money, but if in the motion it says that money should be vired, I would have to say from where, and that puts us back to where Councillor Eason was. So seek alternative sources and get officers working on it and all the rest of that. Absolutely right, I'll support that now, but I can't support it if we've got the word vired in there. It doesn't actually achieve anything.
Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to ask, if I may, could we just hear the, so that we don't get confused, can we just hear the complete amendment? Could I ask that perhaps the monitoring officer or the chief executive read out the full amendment that we are now presumably debating? Would that be all right? Sorry, it's a point of clarification because I'm not sure now what bit we're debating.
If Councillor Guppy is minded to give me a copy of that amendment, I'd be delighted to read it out. Councillors, welcome to the land of debate. Amendments are always good fun. As I wait for that, I'll offer you a view. My view is that is an amendment because the opening statement held to the principle of the Councillor Eason's motion, which was to via. So the core of to via, I believe, remains in the amendment. The suggestion is that you just explore other routes as well. So it is an amendment. It is appropriate to debate it. I will read it out if somebody chooses to pass it to me.
Or would you like us to read it out?
Where you want to add it. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not easy.
It's fine. So the amendment actually comes on right towards the end, I therefore bring a motion to council seeking support, to seek support to via monies from reserves to bring the park to a high standard once there has been full engagement with the community and exploring other avenues of financial contribution to the project, and that the monies will be reclaimed in full from the 106 monies.
Is everyone clear with that? Thank you. Right, Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. I can only talk on the amendment. The amendment suggests further community involvement. There has been and is always ongoing community involvement, and if Councillor Watkins had minded to come to council meetings in Caldergot, she would realise that there is discussions across the piece on community involvement. There are various ways forward. Basically, the amendment is very, very similar to what I'm saying. I'm concerned that there seems to be double standards in this council. In Portskewett, there was no 106 monies. Yet £110,000 of phone from reserves to supplement the failure of getting 106 monies. All I'm asking for, and now the amendment, sorry, is asking for the environment of between £30,000 and £40,000, I understand, to bring the park up to standard. Won't be for this year, it'll be too late, it'll be for next year. But the essence of it is, I believe that we should have the same facilities that Portskewett had, but we will pay ours back. And that's my understanding of the situation in 106 monies at the time.
Because this needs to be verified, because you mentioned Portskewett, and I don't know what went on there.
I understand
I'll ask Councillor Fox
£10,000
to explain to us what went on at Portskewett.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, but at the same time, I'll speak to the amendment because that's what we're discussing at the moment. I presume Tony was speaking to the amendment as well. 106 monies have been spent in Portskewett, as have other communities. That is a commonplace. Their groups come together, they decide how the 106 should be allocated, and significant elements of 106 have come to Portskewett over the years and been allocated to local causes, and no doubt that will happen in the future with some 600 odd houses coming to our community. But at no time do I remember us, unless I'm told otherwise by officers, that it was vired from reserves until that 106 was made available. I cannot recall that. However, Councillor Watkins, I'm supportive of what you opened with, but I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I can't support the motion whilst it still supports the idea of viring from reserves. If it didn't say viring from reserves, and all the other elements are absolutely fine, as I was saying in my opening statement about encouraging people to come on board and to draw up their plans in readiness. And it's really great that people are willing to contribute so that you can actually have a better opportunity there than what perhaps just the 106 money might do. I mean, that's the essence of what you're trying to say. Let's make the very best of what we can do there. So the only sticking point for me, and I'm sure many members of my group, is the fact that this spending it before we've got it issue is a dangerous precedent. And as I shared earlier, it's something we did at one time before and got our fingers burnt to the council, and you should learn lessons from those sorts of things. So sadly, unless there is an amendment to that again, which takes out the viring from reserves, I'm afraid I can't support it again.
I'll ask
if it's okay, members, I'm going to continue just to try to be helpful. There will not be an amendment to the amendment. You are debating an amendment, and you will debate it until you vote on it. You will either support it or you will defeat it. Then you may choose to raise another amendment.
Does anyone else want to speak on the amendment? Councillor Murphy.
Only really, Chair, to repeat what I said when I thought I was trying to be helpful before the actual amendment was put forward. That amendment does contain a flaw, which means that it can't really be supported. As the leader said, if you took the word environment out, it would be very supportable. And while I'm on my feet, yes, there was an error made many years ago whereby Section 106 money in the Portskewett case wasn't forthcoming, and we did take money out of the 106 pot to put that right. That's never happened since, and as far as I'm concerned, will never happen again.
Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks, Chair. everything I agree with. I guess I am looking at via monies from reserves, because to some degree this is a policy change, and I know there's developments right across Monmouthshire where members are saying we'd like our money up front so that we can put community services in place while we're waiting for the 106 money. However, with Councillor Easton, I absolutely fully understand his frustrations. I think anything like this, we need a set of criteria because it needs to be fair and transparent. And we've got to be very careful on monies that go to various wards. So you have Portskewett, a ward member is the leader of the council, he gets his money. You've got somebody in opposition and they don't get their money. Now, I am absolutely saying, Peter, there is no way you are going down that track, and that is not what you have done. But it could be seen to have been done that way. So we have to be very careful on what we do here. I mean, I don't know whether there is a policy that absolutely no way, there is no money up front, we just have to wait for the 106 money coming through, or we decide that actually on some occasions there might be a reason for that, and therefore we need a set of criteria and possibly to go through a scrutiny committee to look at the benefits and also the impact of doing that. I would be struggling, I'm sorry, Councillor Easton, to support this, because I do know there are other developments who are saying we want our money up front as well. But I do think it needs to be looked at and a set of criteria put together. Do I want to put amendment to amendment? Not really. Life is too short. Thanks, Chair.
Madam Chairman, as a point of personal explanation, I think that's the correct terminology. There is some insinuation, perhaps not intended, but that some way, being the leader of a council, I've managed to lever in more 106 money, whereas others can't do so. And I feel quite upset about that insinuation. And I would, whilst I hear what Phil said about monies vied out of a 106 pot, nothing to do with reserves, perhaps I could ask our financial officers to actually clarify that position, because I would not want anybody watching this thinking that because you're a leader of a council or holding what is perceived as a senior position in this council, there is some way you get favourable treatment. And I think, and I know, Debbie, you weren't really meaning that, but that's what it may have been come over and perceived as. And I would ask officers to give clarity about the 106 money for Portskewett in the past, please.
Paul Matthews.
I think I said in your induction that a good council is when you never hear an officer's voice, but we're learning, aren't we? We'll deal with the Portskewett issue separately and in writing, okay? Just to help members, our approach to 106 is absolutely clear. We do have a policy. We do not spend it until we get it. If there is ever to be a situation where that's not the case, it is subject to a specific report. So our policy position is absolutely clear, and we have a very clear process in the council for determining how Section 106 is spent. So the motion that you're debating here, I don't think you need to unnecessarily go into the detail of policy positions, because I've just stated them for you. I think you could go back to the amendment that you're debating and form a view about whether you support it or you're against it.
Councillor Watts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I support what Tony's doing, but effectively isn't the backdrop of this, looking at the wider picture, that I guess that with 106 money, everybody's getting really twitchy about getting that 106 money, because developers are saying, well, look, we're coming to the end of the project, it's not viable, we're not, we've seen this with affordable housing as well. So aren't we, in the next 5 years, and maybe we should look at this again, review our strategy, if you like, to actually obtain that 106 money, because you're going to get a lot more of this, frankly. Thank you.
Councillor Easton, have you spoken on the amendment?
Yes, I've spoken on the amendment.
Right, we're dealing with the amendment.
Can I come in at this point? The amendment, Chair, is very, very similar to the motion. There's an extra couple of lines added to it. So
it is an amendment, and that's it.
All right.
Those in favour of the amendment, please put your hands up.
That's 13 for the amendment, Chairman.
Those against?
That exceeds 13, so the amendment is lost.
Now we're back back to the motion now. Do we debate this again? Yeah, you may go back to the debate on the motion. Anyone wish to speak now?
Do we go to the vote, Chair?
Yeah. Yes, if nobody else wants to speak. We're voting now on the original motion. Those in favour?
So that's 10 for the motion, Chairman.
Those against? I don't need to vote.
Defeated, Chairman.
Yeah. The motion is defeated. We now go to the motion from County Councillor Bitruni.
Yes, thank you, Chair. During the course of the campaign, obviously, as all the members here know, you speak to many people, you speak about all sorts of issues and concerns they have. And it was no different for me. And I met a resident who explained to me this situation I set out in the motion. And I have to say, I was educated in the details of pensions and women's pensions. I was familiar with the general WASPI campaign. This is not WASPI, I know it's not, so they were at pains to tell me. I was familiar of the equalisation concerns and the development of WASPI and the kind of background to that, but this is a distinctly different proposal, which is more a compromise than the WASPI proposal, which essentially is meeting the government halfway in terms of equalising pensions for women. I don't want to go into the details here, but it's set out in the motion, and I think Councillor Blakebird is going to set out all the details and send a round robin email to all councillors if they're interested. But it's essentially about women's pensions and the pace of equalisation for their age with men. And where it relates to this council, and it was pointed out to me by residents, is many of these women would be the volunteers this council hopes to rely on over the coming years to deliver services or other kind of arrangements that, quite frankly, we're going to rely on. A couple of weeks ago, we were praising the volunteers in a press release, and quite rightly so. But this demographic of women, usually grandparents looking after their children's children, also maybe doing social care duties for their elderly parents. These women do a tremendous job for our communities, in their local communities, for their families, and quite frankly, usually do unpaid work that eases the burden on social services in local authority. And they should be supported by this local authority wherever reasonably we can do so. And I think requests just for a letter, and incidentally I wrote this without knowing what the UK government would be. It could have been a Labour government, I still would have written exactly the same motion. It's a compromise. It's not asking for everything, but it's just saying, look, meet these women halfway, slow down the pace of equalisation so those women aren't harshly treated, and this will help this local authority in the right initiative and getting people to help out in their communities and give them the time to do so and the financial means to do so. So I urge all councillors, it's just a simple letter from this council to the UK government outlining our concerns, our issues, and supporting Express for the campaign.
Is this seconded? Oh, thank you. Councillor Jim Higgins. Breakbear? Oh, I thought you were asking to speak. Well, right, carry on.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks. Thanks to Dimitri for that introduction. Dimitri and I have been working together on this because the negative impact of this policy change was brought to our attention by residents that we represent in our ward. And together we thought that this motion and subsequent discussion was a good way for the 63 is the new 60 campaign group to access the democratic process in order to be heard and for their issues to be highlighted, because for so long it's been pushed into the shadows. So that's why we thought the motion was a good way forward. Many people don't know about this policy change. Even people who are affected by it don't know about this policy change. Mariana Robinson, in the gallery with her colleagues here. I learnt so much from her, and she has been affected by the speeded up process of the 2011 Act, and she's a proactive very proactive campaigner, bringing these issues to the attention of other 50s-born women. And again, many who still believe they're ready to retire at 60 and they're going to get a bit of a shock. Mariana and the 63 is the new 60 campaign group are the authors of a detailed proposal, and this is an attempt to meet the government halfway to get some sort of compromise. I will, if you're interested, send you the proposal that they have put together because it's well thought through. There's financial elements in there as well, and they clearly highlight what the inequalities are. So I will do that. Ultimately, the compromise is that they will work an extra 3 years and the government will pay them 3 years, so they meet in the middle. Because at the moment, what's happening is women who thought they were retiring at 60 have to fast forward to 66 to get in line with men retirement age. So they have to do that huge leap. What they're suggesting is that they move to 63, and then after then it's incremental increases until everything's in alignment along with the 2011 Act. So the problem with it is 50s women, particularly those born from April 1953 and April 1960, have had their retirement age, as I say, fast-tracked from 60 to 66. They agree that men and women should retire at the same age. That's right and that's fair. But this, as I say, this isn't the issue. The issue is the speed of the transition, which I've explained. They've had to do a huge jump. And so 50s women are disproportionately disadvantaged by this sudden pensionable age increase. That's where the issues are. Now, history tells us that 1950s women did not benefit from a level playing field. I think when you look back, and those who've lived through that period, they were socially, educationally, and economically disadvantaged. There was no equality at work, and we must remember that the Equal Pay Act didn't come in till the 1970s. No childcare, welfare benefits, or encouragement to take up educational opportunities or job opportunities. Women had to rely on their husbands for financial security in the main. Now, 50s women have lived through unequal times, and now this austere policy change and a seismic shift, actually, in their pensionable age only compounds their disadvantage. Arguably, it is unfair to ask these women to bear the brunt of the change. The decision and process has meant they haven't had time to put plans into action, and many are losing up to £48,000. Now, there are women out there who come from wealthy families and they're fine, but there are vulnerable groups of women on low income that it really does have an impact on. The other area they're concerned about is the administration of the policy change, and it's something I briefly spoke to Sarah about. The transition process can only be described as coarse and crude because it doesn't take into account complexities linked into that transition. There are huge discrepancies in the new timeline, which means that some women have to wait longer than others. So, for example, somebody 7 months older than Mariana is already claiming their pension now, while she has to wait till 2019. And someone 7 months younger than Mariana has to add on a further 18 months. So there's no fairness, and as I say, it's very coarse and crude. Communication is the other issue they want to raise. There's major concerns over the lack of information given for those women in order to, one, challenge the policy, and two, say, organise their lives around the changes. At best, communication was inadequate. At worst, it could be described as a little bit subversive, a little bit get it under the radar. Women were not informed about the changes to their state pension. Some people get informal letters aged 59, ready to retire at 60. Oh no, you've got another 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So that didn't come through. There was no information or consultation. We love the engagement consultation. That did not go on. And they weren't able to get involved in the decisions that have an impact on their life. And they were disempowered through ignorance. I guess if you did an equality impact assessment now on that decision, a lot more thought and scrutiny would have gone into that. But I don't think they had equality impact assessments when those decisions were made. The Department of Work and Pensions website apparently wasn't kept up to date. It continued to say that retirement age was 60 with 30 years national insurance contributions, when actually the policy had already changed, saying it was 66 with 35 years in contribution. So communication is a big fault, a big flaw in all of this. In summary, the timetable of change is too fast. Lack of notice and unfair transition tables has a disproportionate negative impact on the 50s born women, particularly those born in 53, 54 and 55. So what is it they want? All they want is a fair deal. Fair transitional arrangements for 1950s women. They're looking, as Dimitri said, they're looking for a compromise. Moving the retirement age from 60 to 63 with incremental increases in line with the 2011 Act. Finally, why bring this to your attention now? Because people have said, many have argued that the decision and the policy change was made years ago. Time has moved on, water under the bridge. But in reality, this decision is impacting on lives now and into the future and is very, very relevant. Women are beginning to feel the bite of poorly thought through policy change, and many are beginning to struggle as we speak. How many are impacted by this? Well, it has an effect on a significant number of residents. If you include the whole 10 years of 50s born women in the UK, then you're looking at around 3.4 million, a sizable number of people. Within Monmouthshire, hot off the press, got a text, so it's up to date, 4,240. So it's not just the one or two, and I'm sure if you go out there in your wards and you ask people, you will find there's many, many women being affected by that. And part of our job is letting them know that they're affected by this, because as I say, many are in blissful ignorance thinking they're retiring at 60. And you know what, even if it wasn't a significant number, it is our duty to represent our residents and help them raise issues that have an impact on their lives and highlight any inequalities and injustice. What the 63 is the new 60 group. What do they want from this motion and subsequent debate? To raise awareness of the problem. Hopefully we're able to do that. Gain our support to help them challenge a policy decision which disproportionately disadvantages a group of 50s born women. So they want to challenge that. They request the UK government to review the impact of their decision, because I think they're not looking at what the impact is, with a view to exploring a compromise and a compromise outline in their proposal. I'll just hand these out as well so people can have a look at. And as I say, I will send out their proposal so if you've got more detail. Because even at the end of... Sorry. All right. Okay. Just at the end of this, we just need to keep speaking and not let these women be forgotten. So if I just hand some of these out while debate continues, is that all right?
Councillor Pratt. And then Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have to disagree with some of the generalisations that were given to us there by...
Madam Chair, if I may, it's appropriate for members to stand when they're speaking.
Okay. I just have to disagree with the generalisations there. As somebody that is in this age bracket and that worked in the 80s for FTSE 100 companies, and I had very good opportunities, although I didn't go to university. I have to say the picture she painted doesn't even describe my mother, who was born in the 1920s and worked full-time. So I have to disagree with that generalisation. I think certainly a lot of women in the 80s and 90s had good opportunities at work and also had every chance, certainly in the companies I work for, at every level from the shop floor upwards to take out a pension scheme. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Councillor Bertuni and Councillor Blakeborough for bringing the motion forward. I'll start by saying, firstly, I support pension equalisation. I think it's right that we should be looking at that changing demographic and ensuring we're reflecting parity in the way that we go forward. And as with any public policy decision, there's always going to be an impact on the first group that are affected by that. The problem for me, and I welcome what you say and support what you say in terms of the poor communication, I think that was an issue. And I also think in terms of the acceleration of the change that's come in place. So I think many have been left with inadequate time to plan. And that's certainly causing problems in terms of a sense of goalposts being changed as part of this. For me, there's a real particular issue with a certain demographic of this group, and that's those at the lowest end of the economic scale. They are the ones that are probably least likely to have been aware of the changes that were forthcoming, and also the ones that are probably more likely to be employed on manual jobs, which, they're going to be the ones that are going to have more difficulties as you get older, such as caring responsibilities. And so my own personal feeling on this matter is that it's the women who are suffering the real economic hardship and financial hardship that should be given the priority as a matter of urgency. So bringing us just to the motion itself, I support in principle, but I'm afraid I do have an amendment to make. I'm keen to acknowledge the principles behind equalisation, so I'd like to bring that into the motion. And in terms of the actual proposals, in terms of the 63 as a new 60 project, I've done lots of research, and I must admit I couldn't find a lot of detail about this. So I'm going into this with a lack of knowledge around it, particularly around the costings. I'm sure that probably is the best proposal that could be put forward, and it's certainly one I think the government should consider. And as such, I would like to remove the part of the motion which starts with therefore and ends with act, and to replace it with this council supports the UK government in the principle of pension equalisation, which aims to ensure greater parity given our changing demographic. However, we do note the concerns of our residents that are affected, and this council will make contact with the UK government to request further exploration of the 63 is a new 60 proposal, and indeed all options around transitional arrangements. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Certainly, I'm in favour of pension equalisation, and I think that's a good measure. I think I do have some comments to make, though, in relation to the motion that was proposed originally and then seconded in the picture that was portrayed of women in that particular group, that they were grandparents and that they were uneducated. I'm not a grandparent.
We're discussing the amendment now, not the motion.
I did not say they were uneducated. No one ever said that.
No. Just the amendment, please, Councillor Brown.
Well, in terms of the amendment, I do have a personal interest because I am in this particular age group. And I think one of the concerns was to do with the fact that women in this age group weren't given sufficient notice of the changes that occurred. And I have been, residents in my area have made the point about concern about the changes here. And I think that there is a need to look further again at transitional arrangements, because people do go in for pension planning, and a change from getting a pension at 66 to then suddenly being told that you get it at 66 rather than 60 is quite a change for people to have to put forward to. And I think this was the main concern, really, of people in this age, was the lack of notice in terms of the change, and therefore the proposal that's been put forward in terms of looking again at the transitional arrangements, I think is a good one. Thank you.
Councillor Bertuni.
I've looked at the bosses at the back, and they've given me the thumbs up, so we're happy to accept that amendment. I'm here to represent their interests. It's nothing political. Whatever works for you, it works for me. Happy to send that and withdraw my motion.
You want to speak on the amendment now? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Women in the workplace over the last 40 odd years, and in fact further back, have had poor treatment from their employers or whatever. Many of these women in the last 40 years have been encouraged, don't pay national insurance, you can live off your husband's pension. A lot of them know, because of the advice they were given wrongly, are now picking up that problem. A lot of women were not given the proper advice that when they worked and paid national insurance, full national insurance, that when they finished work to have children, that they would be entitled to HR health home responsibility allowance, which will give you full national insurance. And if you had a good employer who guided you through this, you would, at the age of 60 or thereabouts, have your full entitlement to a pension, not just to live off your husband's pension, which some women at 60 may not have. So we come back to the position of women in the last 40 odd years who came to be 60 in 1953. In April 1953, we were picking up their pension in March 2017, which is 64 and a half. If in the year after that, you were picking up when you're 65 and a half, and it would be progressive after that. So I believe that, yet again, women have been poorly advised, poorly communicated with, and they're now having to pick up the tab, or potentially pick up a tab, for errors that has been, I think, forced on women without proper consultation. And we've got to be mindful of the future that women play an important part in the workplace, in the community. They also bring up families, and while they're bringing up families, they should be given the full credit without having to go and ask for the full credit of home responsibility allowance, which would put them in a better position at the time of 60-ish when they've got their full pension rights. But to deal with the amendment, I support the amendment. I think that we should put pressure on the government to make some changes, because the people who were born in 53 and 54 will gain nothing at the moment. It's after that that it's got to be progressive, and I support the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the baby boomers myself, it's quite clear that there is a pensions crisis in this country, and that I fully accept the need to save money over time. At the same time, this motion is extremely moderate and supports a group of people who will be hit extremely hard. And I think there is a way forward, and it's as the original motion and now the new motion suggests. And it's reasonable because now that the magic money tree has been found not to be growing in an allotment in Islington, but in the gardens of number 10 Downing Street, if millions and millions of pounds can be given to people in 6 counties of our broader country, then I think the government can support this group of women who find themselves in an almost impossible position.
Councillor Easton, can you turn your mic off? Sorry. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment, or should we go to the vote? Go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands.
That's carried, Chairman.
Yep. This now becomes a substantive motion, and we have to vote on it again. So please, all those in favour of the substantive motion, raise your hand. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. We now come to item 9.1. Mr. Philip White, would you like to... Is that turned on up there? Yes. Yes, please. I think it's turned on. I think so. I was going to say, try the mic if it not, make sure it's turned on. Right.
Yes, I
Thank
think that's
you.
worked. Okay. I'm here to present the County Council the Audit Committee's annual report for 2016 and 17. This account of the work of the committee provides information under a number of broad headings consistent with the committee's terms of reference. For example, to oversee the authority's internal and external audit arrangements, the Audit Committee considered reports from the Welsh Audit Office on the financial and performance issues and numerous reports on the workings of internal audit. To review and assess the risk management, internal control and corporate governance arrangements of the authority, The authority's policy and performance manager provided 3 reports for the committee's consideration. These were an overview of the council's performance management arrangements, a progress report on Welsh Audit Office proposals for improvement made after the corporate assessment completed by the Wales Audit Office in March 2015, and a report on strategic risk assessment 2016. The committee also considered, at the request of the full council, the use of 0 hours contracts, as you will see from a subsequent paper today. To review the financial statements prepared by the authority, the committee considers the council's statement of accounts prior to and following the external audit of them. The draft accounts were presented in June with the final audited accounts in September. Now, this is not an exclusive list. I refer you to the annual report for a more comprehensive account. The report shows that the workings of the committee have been both valuable and productive, and provides assurance to the council regarding the committee's activities in the effective governance of financial affairs and other matters by the authority. And I submit the report to the full council. Thank you.
Would you like to ask any questions? Oh, Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to ask any questions, but I just wanted to thank Mr. White for coming here today and actually presenting his annual report. And I think this is really healthy. And I thank the Audit Committee for the work they've done. It's so important to have that internal challenge, critical friend who is looking at everything to make sure we can get things right and proper. And I know the following report is helpful again, but I obviously won't jump to that now. But can I thank you for the work you've done, for the robustness of your challenge and scrutiny, and for the way personally you've chaired it and brought it here today. I think that bodes well for the future of audit and governance in this county. So thank you.
Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I fully support what the leaders just said. What we do know is this, that every meeting we have, I think it's just about every meeting, someone from the Wales Audit Office is here, and more often than not, they have something to say. And in relation to where we might have gone astray slightly or whatever. But the Audit Committee, and if you look at that report, that's fairly comprehensive in what we've done over the past 12 months. And I admire Mr. Philip White for the way he's conducted the agendas from the chair and the way he's sought out information that he wanted and put people on the spot as well sometimes to give explanations for different things. So the recommendations there, and I don't know if the leader proposed that we accept the recommendations, but if he did, I'm seconding it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I should have declared apologies. Discourteous to the chair. I apologise. I should have declared an interest in this item because I am a governor on Mountain House School and was in some way involved in this particular item, so I've taken a part in the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Dudley, if I can be of assistance to you there is no problem at all. You've taken a full part in the debate here, and indeed voting. The report before you is that of the Audit Committee. Perhaps it's considered a matter to the school to which you are a governor, but that doesn't preclude you in this instance taking a full part in the debate. Okay.
Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chair. Yes, I'm a member of the Audit Committee, and I think it was a very successful year. We carried out quite a number of in-depth investigations, you might say. But I'd like to ask Councillor Murphy one point on 414 and 415 regarding the discussions we had about Chepstow School. It was a case of getting the school's budget and likely to be brought under control. Are we likely to see a secure future for the budget in Chepstow School based on the deliberations we took in the Audit Committee?
Councillor Murphy.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm happily comment on that. We've had regular meetings with the representatives of Chepstow School, the head quite often, but in every case the business manager and the the member of staff who assists her. I'm happy to report that the recovery plan has been amazingly successful, to the point where looking forward to the end of this current year, they are actually forecasting to be in slight surplus. So the turnaround has been absolutely amazing. The amount of work put in by the school has been incredible, and full credit to them.
Thank you.
Councillor Bertruni.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was on the committee for last term, and I want to echo all the comments said by Councillor Fox and Higginson on the chairmanship of it. Now I'm not on the committee, I want us to ask for a level of reassurance that you will continue your diligent scrutiny work on the administration, particularly on the area around basic financial accounting and it not being done in key areas in this council's operation. And I hope you give me a level of reassurance that will be followed up and made sure that that's corrected. I'm relating to some events accounting which the WAO raised with us at that audit committee. Don't let it slip under the radar, please.
I'll just say noted to that.
Would you like to continue with the... do we have to ask for acceptance? Yes, we did have a proposal of the accept and had a second. All in favour of accepting? Thank you. Now then, would you like to continue with 9.2?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As you will all know, the Council at its meeting on the 20th of October 2016 received a report from the Head of People Services and Information Governance outlining the use of 0 hours or non-guaranteed hours or casual contracts across the authority. Following debate, a motion was put and agreed that the Audit Committee should look at the 0-hour contracts within Monmouthshire County Council and a report be presented to Council at the earliest time possible. This paper is intended to provide the Council with an account of the inquiries which the Audit Committee carried out into the matter, to provide an account of the conclusions arrived at, and to highlight any issues of concern. The recommendations made in the report are, in summary, the County Council should note that the Audit Committee is satisfied that Monmouth County Council does not use 0 hours contracts for anyone it employs according to the definition a flexible contract where an employer does not guarantee set hours of work for an employee. The employee is contracted to that employer and cannot work for another employer. The County Council does employ casual workers who are not obliged to do any work for the authority if they choose not to. It is accepted that this is helpful both to the authority when organising work patterns and suits many of the casual workers who have other commitments or do not wish to be committed to fixed hours. It is recommended that the use of casual employment should continue to be monitored. Managers and service areas should take ownership of this for their own areas. Where appropriate, Monmouthshire County Council should continue to offer casual employees conventional employment contracts if the work has become a regular commitment, for example. For the detail, I refer you to the written report. Issues raised in the report included it is good practice, and we are told it is the authority's policy, that staff engaged through non-guaranteed hours arrangements should have terms and conditions of service broadly similar to those of their permanent staff. While the report acknowledges that this may not always be possible, there is a discussion at 410 of how the employment of casual workers may lead to liabilities in employment law, for example, concerning holiday pay and redundancy terms. I also commented, included at 411, on reputational issues that may arise for the County Council from using agency workers should those agencies fail to follow Monmouth County Council practice. I submit this report to you on behalf of the Audit Committee.
Councillor Bertruni.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I really don't want to plunge this debate into semantics, But what you've just described, or what you've defined, is an exploitative zero-hour contract, and not a zero-hour contract. I'll give you the government definitions on gov.uk. A zero-hour contract, this means three things. They are on call to work when you need them. You don't have to give them work. And three, and critically, they don't have to do work when asked. So that is a zero-hour contract. Where the definition you've applied is exploitative zero-hour contract, where they are still not allowed to work for another employer. And well, that's true. That's in there. That is the definition.
With respect, Chair, Councillor Petrucci knows absolutely full well that that is not the case. He sat in on every single one of those debates. There is no mutuality of obligation in any of the contracts. Nobody is required to work. They are free to work for other people. This is not an exploitative contract.
Just say, if you'd let me finish, I wasn't actually saying the council had done it. I'm talking about the report and the use of semantics. You define a zero-hour contract as the employer is attached, that they can't work for another employer. That's how it's defined in this document. I'm just saying that's how it's defined in this document. That is not a zero-hour contract. That's an exploitative zero-hour contract. Zero-hour contracts on gov.uk, Google it now, says they don't have to do work when asked. That is a zero-hour contract. Now, we can argue about whether a zero-hour contract should be deployed generally, but it's really important to be clear, and this council to be clear, that what's not happening in this council is that we have exploitative zero-hour contracts, which I applaud. We don't have them. I agree. You jumped too early, Councillor Murphy. That is not happening. But that is not a zero-hour contract, as the government defines it.
Councillor Breakber.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. I guess, first of all, we're not saying that we don't want any zero-hour contracts. The report quite nicely, if you like, illustrates the benefits to both the worker and the organisation of zero-hour contracts, because it's about flexibility. It's fine. This is about measuring and monitoring the appropriate use of zero-hour contracts, and that's kind of my concern. So just a few observations then. I want to end with 4 questions, if that's okay. We need to keep an eye on the number, the frequency use of zero-hour contracts. Now, in the report, it tells us that 9% of our workers are on zero-hour contracts. When you remove the exam invigilators and supply teachers, then you're looking at 6%. Now, in a December 2014 labour force survey, it stated that 2.3% of the UK workforce are on zero-hour contracts. And that's increased to 3% more recently. So the UK average is 3%, and we are 9%. So we've kind of got to bear that in mind. The Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, their figures show that 25% of public sector employers use zero-hour contracts compared to the private sector of 17%. So actually, we need to keep a watchful eye, because we in the public sector, we are culprits in developing a zero-hour contract culture. And that's why we need to be particularly careful. Now, I'm not suggesting that Monmouthshire County Council is the public sector equivalent of Sports Direct. I'm not saying that. But we need to be aware that 9% when the UK average is 3%. CIPD also noted that zero-hour contract workers are more likely to be women. No surprise there, and younger people. Tend to be part-time and low-paid work. I would be really interested in a gender and age breakdown of our zero-hour contract workers. And again, I don't want MCC to be accused of employment discrimination, so we need those figures and we need to kind of look at the detail of those. Now, as we know, there are benefits to zero-hour contracts, but they do not offer a guarantee of work or financial stability, and we have to be aware of this. So if we're looking at the appropriate use of zero-hour contracts, and again, definitions, CIPD and ACAS advise that a zero-hour contract is for short-term or irregular hours. I think we agree with that. 0 hours contract is not appropriate if a person works regular hours over a continuous period of time. So an example is if you've got somebody working 9 to 1, Monday to Wednesday, and have been doing it, say, 12 months or more. In that situation, it is more appropriate that they are offered a permanent part-time contract or fixed contract. They also suggest that if a staff is needed to perform core element of a service, then that should not be 0-hour contract. And I do kind of look towards the leisure services for that. So my 4 questions are, can you assure me that all those on 0-hour contracts who work regular hours over a continuous period have been offered a fixed term contract? And I'd also like to know how many have been offered. Question 2, I'm interested to what is the gender and age breakdown of the 9%. And question 3, what statutory employment rights are offered to our 0-hour workers? And question 4, what do you believe are the reasons for Monmouthshire County Council being above the UK average of 0-hour contracts? These are things that have come to my attention, and I need assurance that we are not exploiting our workers. Thank you.
Mr. White, would you
Madam Chairman, may I address some of the points that have already been raised?
Thank you.
I'll start with the councillors' 4 questions to begin with. I'm afraid I'm not an official of the County Council, so I think those first 3 questions have to go to the head of People Services. As far as your 4th question is concerned, many people will know I'm a statistician by profession. What I would be looking at would be the difference between the employment mix in the local authority and the UK employment mix, and that might explain some differences. Otherwise, I have no opinion about it. On the matter of semantics, which was raised by Councillor Petruni, the account is it's an account of the discussions that took place within the audit committee, and we chose that definition of what a 0-hours contract was. There was quite a lot of discussion about casuals. There's quite a lot of information in there about it and how they aren't employed. But for everyone's benefit, I think one of the advantages of this particular report is that it does set out what the council's stated policy is, especially on the issue of where the work becomes regular and whether the person should be offered a conventional employment contract if they want it. So that's in the public domain now. And I think that if there ever was any debate about this in the future, you could come back to this report as an anchor point.
Councillor Taylor, for a... She didn't put her hand up. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, if I may. Thank you for the report. It's been a long time coming because Council may remember that I put the motion to Council on the 22nd of September 2016 and asked that a report around 0-hours contracts should be come back to Council as soon as was practicable. I think there were words to that effect. So if as soon as practicable is the following June, then that's not very soon, in my opinion. However, I think that it's important that it is noted in the minute that this was as a result of a motion, because what it indicates to me is that first of all, sunlight is the best form of disinfectant, but it highlights that there were some gaps in the policy, not necessarily in the policies, but in the enactment of those policies, I think, of this council. And it suggests that perhaps our internal processes were not robust enough to ensure that all of our managers were adhering to the policies that are in place around the issuing of employment contracts. I have a couple of questions, if I may, and some of them are not the same as Councillor Blakeborough's, but they are similar, some. And so I'm assuming that from your response, Mr. White, you are suggesting that we should address these to the head of People Services. So can I have just an assurance then that they'll be noted in the minutes and perhaps the responses circulated? I will say that I did write to Mr White in January, specifically with some of these concerns, but I didn't get a specific response from Mr White. I did get a partial response from the Head of People Services, but I still had some outstanding concerns. And I have to say, I was slightly disappointed at the scope of the Audit Committee's investigation into this particular matter. So can I just be clear then? We've said, and it clearly says in the report, that we don't have any trend information on this. Can we be assured that we will be collecting that? And I'd like to understand why we don't have any trend information. I've asked that question before, but why were we not collecting this information previously? Because it is necessary as part of our public sector equality duty.
Yeah.
So can we just be clear about that? And I'd like the response to that. The second thing, and I'd really like a clear response on this, it quite clearly says that casual employees will not be entitled to benefit from the range of entitlements that other employees benefit from, things like annual leave, sick pay, etc. So I just want to be clear then that Monmouthshire County Council does not adhere then to the principles of the Public Services Commission for Devolved Public Services in Wales and their guidance. Is that correct? Am I correct in that point? I'd like to receive a response on that. And I think that, you know, the references, I watched back the Audit Committee discussion around, so why haven't we had any indication from the unions that this is an issue? And I note that in that meeting, Councillor Batruni did point out that it was unlikely that many of our casual workers, because they're not employees under the definition, would be unionised. I thought the scope of the debate about that was a little disappointing, really, because equally, if you've got no mutuality of contract members, are you minded to complain about your circumstances, I wonder? I would say that there's a possibility that you are not. And I would have hoped that Audit Committee would have picked that point up and perhaps looked in more detail at the experiences of some of our workers in using those contracts. So whilst we are clearly saying that there may be a need to use casual hours contracts in this authority to cope with irregular and unusual patterns of work, what we don't want to see is that this becomes a regular approach. And I think the trend information becomes ever more important when we see that there is a concentration of employees in leisure services, and we note the potential for moving to the alternative delivery model. And indeed, I did question when that was brought to Council last, and in terms of the parameters for that, a lot of the consultation with employees is going on through unions. So it leaves open to me the question of how does that work with our casual employees. And finally, if I may, I'd like to ask whether the head of paid service is content with the assurances contained in the report, and to propose actually a further recommendation, potentially to 2.5, which would suggest that the Audit Committee does in fact carry out an audit of those workers currently undertaking casual employment to determine that they are being used on an ad hoc basis, and that where they are becoming regularised, their hours are becoming regularised, that they are offered appropriate contracts of employment. And that details are also reported on an annual basis to Council. Thank you.
Councillor Easton, then Councillor Murphy, and then Councillor Watts.
Thank you once again, Chair. Yes, this was discussed at length in audit, and at the last meeting I did ask some further questions regarding the words casual hours. If I can find it on my page, I've lost it. It talks about regular hours. Now, regular hours in a week is one thing, but I did ask the question: are any employees within the leisure services and otherwise working regular days, which touches on to the point that Councillor Blakeburn made. If you're working 9 till 1, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that's regular. I asked the question, are there any employees who work variable days, which means that by being given a variable day rota for their regular hours, it would disenfranchise themselves from other work, which would be in effect a sort of zero type hours attachment. So that question hasn't been answered yet. You understand the question? If you've got 20 hours a week, for example, and we go work different days every week, it would disenfranchise you from another job if you wanted 10 hours somewhere else, for example.
So there was one question that Councillor Taylor asked directly of me, so that I think that does deserve an answer. I think the question went something along the lines of, am I satisfied with the outcomes of the Audit Committee's work? My answer would be, it's not for me to be satisfied or not. I don't run the Audit Committee. They determine their own agenda, and based on the scope that the Audit Committee took, I think the outcome is reasonable. I'd go further and say that at the various levels that we've looked into this issue over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, I've always been satisfied with the outcome. I think some of the questions put to the Chamber this afternoon, we can look at again and provide answers to. I'd provide an additional comment to all members. If ever you want satisfaction to a question within the Chamber, the more technical you make it, the less likely you are to get an answer on the day. You may want to reflect on, in fact, whether you want to achieve that. If so, you have every opportunity to put your questions in advance.
Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think I'll leave some of the answers to the additional work that the Chief Executive is going to ask officers to do, although I do recall some information given out on gender and age breakdown, but perhaps that didn't get widely shared, but it can be, I'm sure. What I wanted to say was that we have always reviewed the regularity or not of these arrangements. A lot of them, particularly in leisure services, are students who will work during their breaks from university. There's a big chunk who are exam invigilators. There's all sorts of people who are necessarily on these arrangements. We saw evidence recently of some changes where a pattern of work had become regular, and it came forward for us to confirm the permanency of those jobs. So we all saw quite recently evidence of the fact that it is being monitored. I can say that I spoke to the head of People Services today to see if there was any updates, and she confirmed to me that it is a matter that is raised in every management meeting. It is for managers to determine the status of the people that they engage, but it has been put on a far more heightened basis than it was before, albeit that it was looked at before. It's now looked at far more formally than it was. So I can assure members that this is something which is taken very seriously. It is watched on a constant basis, so I think we can be certain that nobody is on those types of arrangement where they shouldn't be.
Councillor Watts, then Councillor Greenland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. White, you said you're a statistician, and you know, I wondered what stats you mentioned. The stats that you did a comparable, but I was looking at the stats yesterday for the increase in use in food bank, which were published last week by the Trussell Trust in Chepstow. Now, Chepstow is one of the wealthiest towns in Wales. It certainly has the wealthiest ward in Wales, and yet it's been a rapid increase of usage of food bank. It's now up to 10% of the population. Within those figures, within those stats, there was an increase in people. So the majority of people that are using food bank are employed or on low wages. Now, bearing in mind, Mr. White, that the local authority is, if not one of the largest employers in Monmouthshire, how does that really fit with you, really, as far as statistics are concerned? Would you ever consider looking at those statistics?
My view is we're a bit off topic on that. I don't think I could be expected to answer a question like that.
Councillor Bob Greenland.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was first brought up in September 16, this issue, and I'm aware that this is not the first time that the Council has discussed it since that date either. It has been brought up on a number of occasions, and I think the appropriate way to have dealt with this is, as has been done, for the Audit Committee to have looked thoroughly into the position. We are now at the point at which I would really like to ask, in terms of individuals, have we got any individual who it is believed we should be employing on a contract who is not on a contract? Because in all this time I would have expected, if there was somebody in that position, for that to have come forward to this meeting. If we don't have anybody at the moment, then I can only assume that the contracts where they are offered, or the lack of contracts, is something which has been decided is the correct way forward. Just on the issue of leisure services, let me, and this might help Councillor Eason, the default position is that people coming into employment in leisure services will be offered a contract. If it is not suitable for them to have a contract, then they will not be in that position. But the default position is contracts, unless it becomes impossible because of the casual hours that they work, which can't be defined within a contract, for that to be the case. So I'm happy in terms of my areas of responsibility that we are offering the right forms of employment that will best benefit employees.
And the only way I can answer that is to say absolutely not to my awareness. My view is that we're digging into an issue, and so far there is nothing to be seen here, almost. There are another series of questions that have been posed this afternoon, which I will ask my officers to take a look at, and at that point I will probably be looking to draw a line on this issue because we need to move on.
Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just want to come back to process a little bit, and I'm not going to cast any views about 0 hours or anything like that, because we have asked a committee to do a piece of work. And sadly, I've seen over my 20 years experience in this council that we commission pieces of work, and when we don't like what they say, we try to redraft them or challenge them left, right and centre. I've seen lots of times, very clearly, we asked a specific job of the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee has presided over that and found its views and is now presenting them, and that's why we're asked to receive those. And Mr. Chairman, I think it's just worth remembering that we should stick to what we're being asked to do. And you know, for instance, Francis asked to add another recommendation. It is not in our gift to offer another recommendation in this. This is the report of the Audit Committee, and it's for the Audit Committee. If Council wishes to commission another piece of work which specifically addresses that question, so be it. The Council can agree to do that. But it's just one of process. We get very loose in this chamber very often in just straying off when we don't like necessarily what we're told.
Sorry, by way of personal explanation, because Councillor Fox mentioned my name, I have asked these questions. I have asked these questions since September. I have asked them directly of the Audit Committee. I have tried very hard to get that detail of information because, quite frankly, we do not know. We still do not know. We are being told that we're not aware, but we haven't had the detailed information in front of us to tell us what that payroll run looks like in this state. So we are taking assurances, and that to a certain degree is fine, members, isn't it? But we are told, I think, and I take you back to Estin, for example, that it is right that when we seek information, we should be given it. The chair of the Audit Committee, because I watched the committee meeting back, said he would like to see an audit of, I won't try and paraphrase you, sir, but you did suggest that there should be an audit, and was told by officers of this council that that would be too time-consuming, too difficult to do. Okay, so if we accept that, then that's fine. I personally don't think it is that difficult to do, and I would have liked to have set this to rest, as the Chief Executive says. I don't want to labour it, but I think it's important that we are assured. I personally am not yet assured. I am assured that we now understand much more than we did about this matter and that we are potentially monitoring it more. But I am still not completely assured, and I just want to make that clear. That's why I'm asking.
Move for recommendations.
Second.
We come to questions from members. The first question is from County Councillor Watts to County Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I can confirm that MCC schools and public buildings have been designed and constructed in accordance with current statutory obligation and Welsh Government funding conditions and recommendations. All designs are undertaken in full consultation with building control officers and as such are designed and constructed in accordance with the latest building regulation requirements. The authority fully engages and consults with insurance advisors as part of the design process to incorporate appropriate measures to mitigate the risk from fire to the property and occupants using the building. In addition, MCC's insurance officer updates the authority's insurance, AIG, with details of our properties on an annual basis. Since the tragic events recently, it's my understanding that officers have done a full appraisal and no problems have been identified. I also understand that all registered social landlords within Monmouthshire have done the same thing.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, well, I do. You know, the motivation is really that obviously there are a number of schools that need clearly being, you know, we've talked about this historically, Thornton School being the, you know, I guess the one that I'm most concerned about and passionate about. It's a school that burnt down 5 years ago. It was half of it was rebuilt with a sprinkler system, even though we were told initially that it was all going to be rebuilt and up to 21st century school standards. That didn't happen. And we were told then it was going to be retro refurb, but basically they were going to have a sprinkler system. That hasn't happened either. And I wondered really how many schools haven't been retrospectively kind of refurbished with a sprinkler system. And then also the other public buildings. If you take this public building, you know, this hasn't got a sprinkler system. And I worry for the staff in this building because, you know, we're shoehorning all these staff coming up from Mega and, you know, we're squeezing them into a very, very tight spot. I was told by one of our officers that staff were allowed, I think it was 11.2 square cubic metres. Now, you know, that's simply not the case. So I worry about the safety aspect of it. So I think it's a pertinent question, and I think we need to look at it again. I don't know the last time we had a discussion about this building with the insurers and what the implications are of moving the staff up here as well. So there are two kind of questions in that. When are you going to look at the schools, and when are we going to look at this public building to ensure the staff in this building are safe?
Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And MCC has functioning fire extinguishers in the following primary schools: Kimminview, Landfoist, Ysgolafenni, Mega, Pembroke Road, Justo, Roggett, and the new one in Raglan. Sprinkler systems. Fire extinguishers. Did I say that? Oh, fire. It actually says sprinklers here, I remember. So, yeah. As you're aware, new schools are currently under construction in Caldicot and Monmouth as part of the 21st Century Schools programme, and both will have sprinklers installed. As regards Thornwell and indeed Castle Park, the extensions built in recent years were constructed with both pipework and sprinkler heads to enable cost-effective future installation of computer systems, as Councillor Watts said. And when both schools are fully refurbished, that will all be connected up. In addition, there are the cladding systems used on buildings are certainly not within that flammable range that unfortunately was installed within London. The matter of this building, it's covered by a high quality fire alarm system that covers all areas including roof voids, and as previously stated, when the building was designed and constructed, MCC building insurers and the consultants were aware of the future uses of the building. The sprinkler system did not form part of their requirements. The only stipulation the insurance raised was that we had a fire suppression system in the biomass fuel store. Other than that, it was standard office building practice. And the matter has been reviewed since. The design of this building, particularly in view of the fact that nobody actually sleeps here, is considered to meet all standards.
We can't ask questions. When there's a question, they just get answer. It's not for debate. Sorry, Councillor Gulkart. Councillor Watts, that's all you're going to get. Councillor Grocott, we can't ask questions. These are individual questions. The individual cabinet members and other councillors can't get involved. Sorry about that. Councillor Howard, are you happy to defer your question? Oh, sorry. Councillor Fox is going to answer. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brian Jones couldn't make this afternoon's meeting because he's had to attend the first of the new Transport Working Group meetings across the 10 authorities. It was important he was there, and I offered to read his answer out on his behalf, so don't shoot the messenger. So this is in his words. Thank you for the question, and I'm pleased to advise Council that I took and an individual member decision on the 14th of June which approved the installation of an electric vehicle charging point in Welsh Street Car Park, Chepstow. The report goes on to delegate the distribution of further charging points in our towns to the head of operations in consultation with myself, meaning Brian. The charging system is being installed and managed by a Monmouthshire-based community interest company at no cost to Monmouthshire County Council. I understand that the number of electric vehicles is growing, and hopefully this initiative will help to demonstrate MCC's commitment to supporting sustainable energy solutions. Madam Chairman, as Brian isn't here to ask supplementaries, I wonder if you'd be good enough to allow me to defer, or rather refer to Roger Hoggins to answer any supplementaries.
Supplementary, Councillor Howard.
Just a brief one, Madam Chair. Subsequent to tabling the question, I noted that the Queen's speech contained a desire that the UK should be a leader in electric vehicles, and as a consequence that motorway service stations and petrol stations should have a charging point and may be forced to include that. But unlike our town centres and villages, I don't think they're necessarily a convenient or ideal place to stop for a couple of hours and while away the time. And of course that would mean our communities and towns would miss out on any contribution to local economies. So I'm grateful for the supportive response. I don't know if Roger can answer it now. I would ask to be provided with a timetable for some kind of rollout to the other towns, because it is important to those residents who've asked the question of me. And if that needs to be reported as part of the action list for the next council meeting, I'm happy for that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Batruni to Councillor Richard John.
Chairman, I looked for your guidance. The 4 questions have been lumped together. Shall I just go for one and the cabinet member answer one, and then, or can we just go for each one individually? Is that okay?
Yes.
Madam Chairman, can we be clear though that this is one question with one supplementary?
Yeah, you only get one supplementary right at the end, but you can deal with them separately as you go along, if you like. Okay. Councillor John.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And can I start by thanking the Leader of the Opposition for the opportunity to, first of all, set out my priorities for this education portfolio. Now, when I first saw the first of the 4 questions, I was tempted to quote perhaps a political hero of the Labour group and say, education, education, education. But I'll try and set out perhaps a more detailed insight into the priorities of this administration. Now, before I set out the 3 priorities, can I offer Council an overview of the scale of change in our school system at the moment? And the Welsh Government is leading education reform simultaneously on a range of areas: initial teacher training, professional standards, curriculum reform, assessment and accountability changes, and revised inspection frameworks. Revised ESTIN inspection frameworks. Now, these changes represent a huge challenge for our schools and all the professional staff who work in them, alongside the local authority and the Education Achievement Service. Now, this is an enormous challenge for all of us, and the first priority I want to talk about is our continued work to drive up standards. And if Council will allow me, I'll break this down into 2 parts. Firstly, we need to improve the standards of every child and young person that we educate, 11,000 altogether in Monmouthshire schools. Now, this means looking at all key stages from our very youngest children in foundation phase through to young people who are trying to secure places in university or their first source of employment at 18. Now, we currently perform at the highest levels in foundation phase and at key stage 2 at the expected level and in those higher levels of achievement. And we have to be realistic about the capacity to further improve on those standards, although we're committed to doing that. And my expectation and priority is that we will continue to improve our performance at those higher levels. At secondary school, we've made progress in key stage 3, but this challenging stage in children's education remains an area of focus for us. Our secondary schools are working closely with the local cluster of primary schools, and that's going to be key in progressing this agenda. At key stage 4, we've seen very real progress over the last 5 years, although I recognise that that has slowed slightly in the past 3 years. This year, we've worked closely with all 4 of our secondary schools to ensure that they're well prepared for this summer's examinations. Now, I should advise members that this is going to be challenging, as there have been substantial changes to the structure of GCSE examinations this summer. For the first time, English language will be the examination that counts towards the key indicator of good GCSEs, including English and maths, and there's a new compulsory maths examination of numeracy. And the Association of Directors of Education Wales has recently written to all local authorities to advise that this year's results will, in essence, not be comparable with previous year's results. 2017 will in effect be a new baseline. Now, Council will know that this administration has made a clear commitment, and we did so in our manifesto, to delivering social justice. It's an absolute priority for all of us in this administration, and we need to ensure that all our groups of vulnerable young people have the support they need to achieve the very highest standards they can. Now, we know that in the past, outcomes, particularly for children entitled to free school meals, has not been good enough. We know that examinations this year, the new ones, are going to be more challenging for some of those students because of the way that those examinations are structured. But I'm going to be working closely with my colleague Sarah Jones, my colleague Penny Jones, to make sure that we align everything we do to support the most vulnerable in society and ensure that those young people have all the resources that they need to be able to achieve their full potential. Now, my second priority is to ensure that schools are well prepared to both promote and enhance the well-being of young people. We know that there's a clear relationship between students' well-being and their academic success, and we're going to be working with all partners to ensure that we can better promote both physical and mental health in our schools. Now, this means that we need to strengthen our partnership working with colleagues who sit around the Public Service Board, and we're prepared to do that. Now, my third priority is to work with colleagues within the Children and Young People Directorate to ensure that we have both the right policies, the right procedures, and the resources we need to ensure that young people can thrive in our schools. At the moment, we know we lose too many of our primary age children outside the county. We need to address this, And we're going to do it through, firstly, reviewing our catchment areas and our admissions policies, but also through driving up standards, improving the performance of our schools, so more schools in our county are good schools, and we've got ambitions beyond that as well. And finally, we're going to be working with colleagues in the Welsh Government to ensure that we have a plan for the renewal of our secondary estate, and that's affordable and suitable for the delivery of education in the near future and beyond. That, I think, answers your first question. If I can answer your next two questions together.
There's the same 10 minutes apply? If this is the start of how they're going to run education.
You are question.
If I can answer the next two questions together.
Excuse me, just a minute. Give Rich John a chance to speak. You asked the question, and he's answered that. Now he'll answer your next question. Right.
Okay, so questions 2 and 3. In the academic year 2012 to 13, in total there were 20 redundancies. In total, there were 11 compulsory and 9 voluntary. Now, this was the year when Derry View had a large staffing reduction, and that accounts for more than half of those redundancies. In the academic year 2013-14, in total there were 10, 6 compulsory and 4 voluntary. And in 2014-15, there were 4 compulsory redundancies and 5 voluntary. Now, some of those related to areas where students who required one-to-one support had left the school, so naturally those roles were no longer required. And there's also one position which was the result of a fixed-term contract coming to its natural end, so there was a redundancy there. And in the academic year 2015-16, there were a total of 10 redundancies, 3 compulsory and 7 voluntary. And to answer your fourth and final question, the answer is 3.
Chair, can I just take some advice regarding to Derry View? My daughter is working there as agency. Do I have to declare an interest? I mean, it's beginning of the end.
No, Councillor Guppy. That's okay. You're not part of this debate whatsoever. In that the question's asked and it's answered. You don't have the opportunity to do anything to influence the debate at all.
Thanks for your advice.
Thank you.
Councillor Bracciuni, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see Councillor Fox has picked his cabinet member well. No normal nonsense you get from the Conservatives. I want a question on. I want reassurance. Actually, I have it on record. The teaching assistant figures you've given out over those academic years. How many of them are you assured that are not due to budgetary pressures placed on by the cuts you've implemented over the last 4 years?
So there are a wide range of reasons why redundancies may be made, and I've given you some of those reasons. The first one was Derry View. I mentioned there was a large staffing reduction in 2012-13 to address, and there were budgetary pressures there. Some of these related to one-to-one support, where the students left the school, so no longer require that one-to-one support. And then there are other schools where there were curriculum changes and there were some members of staff who weren't needed. But I'm not going to stand here and say that there aren't any budgetary pressures in our schools. Of course there are. We're in the public sector across Wales, we've got budgetary pressures. We know that this local authority is one of the very worst funded in the whole country. So yes, we've got budgetary pressures, but we're trying to engage in a debate about how we manage those as effectively as we can, and we're prepared to work with members across this chamber to engage in that mature, constructive debate about how we manage these challenging finances we've got. But you have to accept we've got some difficult decisions to make. So how do you manage those? You can't just moan that we're not putting enough money into schools, because the money's got to come from somewhere. So is it the position of the Labour group that we put up council tax by 5, 6, 7, 8%? Is it the position that we should take more
No,
money
put an
out of
explanation.
social care? To
It's
put it into
illegal
education?
to ra-
We've got
it's
some
illegal
really
to raise the council
difficult.
tax above 5%.
We've got some really difficult decisions to make over the next few years, but we're prepared to make those difficult decisions.
Oh, sorry, it is. Next question, Councillor Baccioni. Councillor Baccioni, your next question, please.
Madam Chair, I'm a governor of Derryview, and I need to declare an interest. I was a governor at the time when large members of staff were made redundant, and I can assure you that it wasn't just the school that was to blame for the predicament, it was our management in this council. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Harris, excuse me, Chairman, can I just assist? Members, when questions are being asked, okay, it's not necessary for you to declare interests, because the question is asked, the question is answered, a supplementary is asked and is answered. There is no scope whatsoever for any other member to get involved in the debate. So there's no need to declare interests. As I say, I hope that's clear and I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baccioni, can we have
As written on the order
your,
paper, Chair.
as written, to Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Baccioni, for your question regarding the new administration's view on pooled funding for social care based on health board borders and boundaries. Monmouthshire and other Gwent authorities have a strong record of pooling budgets where it's linked to effective service and is sound financially. The best example of this being the Gwent Frailty Service, which is the only one of its kind across Wales, which brings authorities and health boards together in a financially sound arrangement. There is legal requirement under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act for care homes to pool budgets by April 2018. And Monmouthshire is keen to extend integration with the health boards. It already has successfully integrated arrangements with other authorities, excluding health boards, including regional adoption, shared lives, and the youth offending service. The risks are whether Monmouthshire is going to benefit and whether it makes for a more efficient service with enough resources. But with this in mind, work is well underway under the governance of the Greater Gwent Regional Health and Social Care Partnership, working with our regional partners to provide and support better outcomes for service users, sustainable services, and a cost-effective outcome. The question of cross-subsidy between authorities must be considered, and the need for effective governance arrangements needs to be met. Discussions are ongoing, and the results will be brought to selects and to full council for approval.
Just to say, that's how a cabinet member answers a good question.
Final question from Councillor Baccioni to Councillor Sarah Jones.
As on the agenda, Chair.
Do you know, I'm almost tempted to give a one-word answer, but I'm sure you'll want to be able to hold me to account going forward. And so I'm going to talk a bit about process and a bit about thinking and take a couple of minutes to answer this. I hope you don't mind. It's very clear, as we all know, that we're a relatively prosperous county, but we do have people experiencing some serious deprivation, inequality and disadvantage. Now, I'm very conscious of that in my role and in the role of being the new Social Justice Cabinet member, which is a new role. And I think it is quite groundbreaking. It's an opportunity to really break that new ground and actually make a difference to the people in the county. The cost of living and accessing basic services is exacerbated by the distance people need to travel, and there's a real challenge in terms of the rurality of our county. So what are my plans as Cabinet member going forward? Well, for me, it's not going to be a strategy about deprivation per se. It's going to be about social justice. It's going to be about inequalities. And it's going to be about how we focus as a council and how we work with our partners. So not just us as officers and council members. It's about our communities, our registered social landlords. It's about the third and voluntary sector and supporting businesses in what I see as being three key areas. The first is to understand those underlying causes of poverty and the disadvantage that our communities face, and then to understand how partnership solutions can be taken forward to help tackle that societal change that's taking place as at present. The second point under this strategy will be to put in place a series of policy interventions. Those interventions will proactively tackle barriers to social mobility. And then it's to ensure that there are safety nets and options for those who experience those barriers and addresses the inequalities which present a risk to community cohesion. So before I present the strategy to you, I want to spend time actually understanding what those issues are in real detail. It's about me listening to you, and I've already started doing that. I've been working with you as members. I've been out in various members' wards, and this is a plea to you to actually come to me and say, I'll come out and join me in my ward and understand what the pressures are. That's what I want. It's about me visiting and speaking to partners and officers, and I've met a number of partners this week, third sector organisations, understanding what they think the societal issues are and how council and local government can tackle those. And it's working with officers, so I've met with a number of officers and will continue to do so. All of this will build on what there is some really good, strong work that's happening already in the county, and I think we have to acknowledge that. There's some really positive work in terms of trying to tackle the deprivation and isolation agenda. There's a lot of work around addressing digital inclusion, the development of the community hubs, local area coordination and small local enterprise. Lots of work around financial inclusion and the youth enterprise approaches to tackling needs. So bringing it back to what you want to hear, when's all this going to happen? Well, it will be the autumn that this will come forward. I will work with all of you in the process to do that. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think I'm very fortunate to be in this opportunity to take forward a new brief and hopefully to take you all and our colleagues with us in that process. So thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, another clear and concise answer. It's refreshing, isn't it? It's a shame we haven't got that in education. On the portfolio in social justice, just to offer some reassurance from... No, it's all right. They don't like hearing about education. They're poor at it. Sarah Jones, on the portfolio under her cabinet portfolio, it talks about the list of the areas you cover. It just got for me a level of reassurance. You talk about deprivation and isolation, but it only says rural. It doesn't talk anything about urban deprivation at all. And I just wondered, could you just change that maybe on your cabinet stuff, or just offer me a level of assurance that urban poverty will not be neglected?
I can absolutely assure you that it's not just rural poverty, it's about urban deprivation as well. And just having been out with some members this week, and thank you to those members that have taken me around their own wards, it's about both sides. And yeah, certainly give you that assurance, Councillor Petruni.
Are you happy with that answer? Yes, I was going to say. Thank you, councillors. That brings the meeting to an end.